Good morning, everyone, again. And here we are again. All right, so our topic for this morning is, what is our topic this morning? Our topic this morning is karma. Does karmic law even exist? Are we responsible for our fathers and our grandfathers and mothers, of course? Are we responsible for their sins? Do we pay for their sins? There are certain passages in the Bible that will tell us that, or suggest to us that we actually perhaps do. Do we pay for the sins of our previous lives? For those of you who totally believe in previous lives and who totally believe that we're here in order to rectify any of the wrongs that we did in our previous lives, I mean, is that accurate? Is that an accurate assumption, or is it not? Before we get to our questions, I just would like to mention last Saturday we were in Sarasota, and I had a wonderful workshop in the morning, and I'd like to thank all of you who came and hope you enjoyed it, as did I. And we also had a great afternoon talking to the spirit world. We had some wonderful, wonderful messages. We had a young girl who died of a drug overdose who came through from the spirit world to talk with her parents. We had a young man who wanted to talk to his mum, who was in the audience. We had father who'd taken his own life, who very much wanted to give a message to his daughter, and on and on and on and on. We had all of these wonderful messages, and we had such a really great time. And I'd like to thank all of you who came and who enjoyed and who are watching what's going on here. We just hold on one second. My puppy is creating an issue. He doesn't want to go into his bed. Yes, so we had such a great time on Saturday. We had such a wonderful time, and we all enjoyed ourselves thoroughly. And of course, one of the best parts of my job is making connections with the spirit world, talking with the spirit world, and giving messages of love and hope and all of that good stuff. So we did a lot of that. And we are now planning our next event, possibly in January. We're looking at January to do our next event in Sarasota. We also do have another event coming up at Elysian Fields Bookstore, also in Sarasota. And what date is that, Carolyn? What is the date?
October 27th.
Thank you, October the 27th. So on October the 27th, I think it's in the evening, we are going to be having a small group of people, and we're going to be, who knows what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing another sort of a workshop. So if you want to know more about that, please email us at rosemary@rosemaryaltea.com. And so, shall we get to our questions? So the first question on karmic law and does karma even really exist is, sorry, we have Carolyn, who is sitting to my far right, who's going to be asking the questions as usual. And of course, as always, we have Grey Eagle, who is standing by my right side. So welcome to all of you. And let's go then, Carolyn, with our first question.
All right, Christina from Meetup asks, are we talking of our karma? And is it true that there's a connection between our sufferings of this life and the sentence to be served for our sins or for the sins of our fathers' ancestors? Thank you.
We are, and who was that again?
Christina.
Christina, that is exactly what we're talking about. And do we pay? Do we actually pay for the sins of our fathers, or do we not? It's a huge question, and it's actually a question that I used to ask myself all the time. In my family, we're going back at least 3 generations. In my family, my father's mother and father, so they would be my grandparents, divorced in the days when divorces didn't happen. They were unhappy, they were miserable, whatever they were, and they divorced. My parents did not divorce, but were thoroughly miserable and unhappy with each other, equally cheating, equally had many affairs. Of course, my mother would say she only did it because my father did it, and my father would never even talk about it anyway. So who knows the rights and wrongs of that? And but they, you know, we grew up in an environment where we knew that they really, really, my mother really hated my father. It sounds like such a strong word, but it's an accurate word. And my father definitely, seriously disliked my mother. And so we grew up in a very, very dysfunctional family. Now, I have 5 brothers and sisters. I have 5 siblings, so that makes the 6 of us. And as it would happen, did we all pay for the sins of our grandmother who got divorced? Did we pay for the sins of our parents? And I used to think that perhaps we did, because of the 6 of us siblings, 1 was never married and the other 5 were divorced, all divorced. Now, we're at varying ages and we divorced for a variety of different reasons, but nevertheless, none of us had or has to this day a healthy relationship with our first spouse. And so was that the sins of the father, or was it just the fact that we grew up in a dysfunctional environment and we did not have the opportunity to learn how to have a relationship? We didn't have the opportunity to learn what we should or should not do, what we should or should not put up with. I have a good friend who has a young daughter, and she has perhaps, let's say, a dysfunctional marriage. It's a great marriage most of the time, and then there are times when her husband becomes extremely abusive. What should she do? Should she put up with it, or should she put her foot down? And if you say yes, of course she should put her foot down, how does she do that? Does she leave him? Does she walk out? Most importantly, what is she teaching her daughter? And we need to teach our children. What did I teach my daughter? We need to teach our children that, and especially our girls, but also our boys, we need to teach our boys that they have to be respectful towards women, and also that they should expect respect from women in return. Because abuse does not happen just to women, it happens to men as well. And we should teach our children that if someone abuses us, if they call us names, even they don't have to necessarily resort to physical violence, because abuse, it can be often much worse when it's verbal abuse. It can go to the heart of a person, and it can really, really be painful. So, you know, do we teach our children, you know, well, you know, hey, you have to suffer because we suffered. You have to pay the penalty for, you know, our behavior. Should I pay the penalty for my grandparents or my parents' behavior? I actually think not. I think that when these kinds of things happen, very often it's because we haven't learned how to be and how to treat others. And so, you know, as adults, that's what we need to do. When I divorced my husband, when he was cheating on me again and again and again, was that the karmic law that I should be hurt, or that I should pay, or that I should learn through that? I think my husband was just a cheat and a liar, and I certainly did pay. But am I going to allow my sins to affect my child? I hope not. So I'm hoping that, although I think, you know, there is something to the karmic law, and I think in certain circumstances there is karmic law, I think that if we're not careful, we can blame everything on karmic law, and I don't think that's right either. Let's have our next question.
Okay, well, Thomas from the UK kind of touched on what you just talking about. He asked, is bad luck karma or environment?
Is bad luck karma or environment? Well, as I just said, I think I just addressed that a little bit. Environment has a great deal to do with it. How we're brought up has a great deal to do with it. And how much we're prepared as adults to be open and to be willing to learn and to be willing to say, you know, take responsibility for your own actions. And I think, you know, why should my grandson suffer for any of the things that I've done? And I don't think that that is karmic law. I think that, you know, that is about our putting our pain and our negativity onto our children and onto our grandchildren, which I certainly am trying not to do. Bad luck. There are people, it is true, there are people who seem to suffer from a great deal of bad luck. And I'm going to sort of talk a little bit, I hadn't intended to talk about this, but it's sort of, it is a curiosity to me, and I'm not quite sure I can explain why this happens, but there are certain families who, let's say, a mother loses her son, and a generation or two later, someone else in the family loses a son, and then another generation, somebody else loses a son. And there seems to be a pattern sometimes in families for this kind of thing. You know, I can't explain it. So when we're talking about, you know, karmic law, well, first of all, when we lose someone, we're not being punished, that's for sure. So if it's karmic law and you put it down to being punished, I don't think we're being punished. I know that when we lose someone close to us, it feels as if we've been punished for something, but I don't think that's the truth. But I don't know why, and I don't quite understand why. There are so many things I don't know. There's so many things I don't have the answers to. But one of the questions that does intrigue me, and perhaps one day I will talk to Gregor more in depth about it, is why does it seem that certain families do have continual issues throughout, the same issues throughout generations? Is that what we might mean as karmic law? So maybe we'll leave that certainly for another day, but we'll perhaps come back and revisit it and go into that a little bit more at another time. Let's have our next question, Carolyn.
Okay, RJ from Montana asks, thanks for these videos. If we behave badly towards someone and then something bad happens to us, is this karma?
You would say so, RJ. Thanks for your question. You would certainly say that it was, wouldn't you? I'm inclined to think it's more about energy, the energy that we put out, because when we put out negative energy, if you imagine that one little thought, one tiny thought is a little tiny pulse of energy which goes out into the universe and goes and reaches the person that that thought is intended for. So if we're thinking a negative thing about a person, or we're thinking negative thoughts about a person, those thoughts that we're thinking will definitely travel out from us. As they go through the universe and as they travel, they will gather more negativity. Like attracts like. So negative energy will attract negative energy. By the time it reaches that person who we're thinking about, it will hit that person. It certainly will affect that person, whether they know it or not. It will affect them, depending on how negative, depending on how strong that negativity is, it will affect them. But then what happens is, as all energy, our own energy returns to us. So now here comes that negative thought. It touches the person that it goes out to. It starts to come back to us. As it comes back to us, again, it's gathering more and more and more negative energy, which then comes and hits us smack in the eye. And of course, you know, there we have it, and we are affected by it. So if we send harm to another, will it eventually harm us? Absolutely, yes, it will. By the same token, and this is a good thing, when we're thinking positive thoughts and loving thoughts and kind thoughts towards others, those tiny pulses of energy, those tiny little thoughts go out into the universe. They reach their intended target. And as they go along, all that positivity, like attracts like, is gathering positive energy as it goes, and it goes and goes, and this energy that you're sending out gets bigger and bigger and more powerful as it goes along, reaches the person that you are thinking about, and then returns. Energy always returns to its source. And so as it returns, and again, it's gathering more positive energy, comes back and back and back and back, and bingo, hits us right between the eye, and we are benefiting from it. So, you know, our thoughts matter, our deeds matter. When we are directing negative or positive energy at someone else, at some point, that will return to us. So be careful what you think. Be careful what you do. Be careful about those thoughts that you put out into the universe, because they have a life of their own, and they do come back to you, good or bad. Thanks, RJ. That was a great question. Next question.
We actually just have a little statement from Dean.
A statement from Dean. Hello,
watching
Dean.
Live.
Hello, darling.
As is Bob. You can say hi to Bob.
Hi,
too.
Bob.
Dean says, many people talk about karma serving justice when someone has bad things happen. They say karma is served. They are getting what they deserve. I do not believe we can judge what others deserve.
Oh, Dean, I believe I'm right with you there. I totally get it. I totally get what you're saying. And you're right, we cannot judge. And those of us who try to judge, you know, be careful. You know, I think, again, in the Bible, I think I've talked twice now about the Bible. I don't want to sound like a Bible thumper, but there is that wonderful little saying, you know, judge not, lest ye yourself be judged. And as you're busy judging other people, and as you're busy judging, you know, their attitude or why they are how they are, and especially if you're judging negatively, you know, be careful, because, you know, would you like someone to be judging you in the same way? I certainly wouldn't. And I certainly am not up to the task of judging anyone else. I much prefer to leave those kinds of judgments to that higher power that I trust more than I would ever trust my own self. Next question.
Okay. June from Worcestershire, England.
Worcestershire.
Sorry about that.
Actually,
June.
we'd say Worcestershire.
Okay.
We don't bother with the Shire bit. It's sure.
My husband's ex-wife did horrible, spiteful things, but yet seems to be living a very happy life. Why hasn't her karma caught up with her?
Oh, you know, don't you hate that? Don't you hate that when somebody does something really horrible to you or to someone you love, and yet they seem to go on their merry way, and nothing seems to affect them or touch them, and, you know, they seem to have all the money in the world, and they seem to be able to go shopping as often as they like. Don't you hate it when somebody else is having such a good time when you have judged that they shouldn't, or they don't deserve it? June from
Yes.
Worcestershire?
Yes.
June from Worcestershire. All right, so June, I can tell you, number one, we just decided that judging isn't such a good idea, because we're always going to get it wrong, because truthfully, we don't know all of the facts. And you might judge that your husband's ex, is that right?
Yes.
Your husband's ex, you know, wasn't such a nice person, but you don't know what happened to her. You don't know what caused her to be that way. Be careful about judging. And the most important thing that you should be working on, that we should all be working on, is not, you know, however good or bad another person's life is, but what our life is like. So, you know, I think that when we do bad things, I think we are accountable. And I think whether we're accountable in this life or whether we're accountable at that moment when we leave this earth, we are accountable. But I think we're more accountable to ourselves, and we have to face our misdeeds, and that's not going to be pleasant for any one of us. None of us is perfect. Every one of us has had bad thoughts at some point or another. Every one of us has had negative thoughts at one thought or another, at one time or another. So, you know, none of us is perfect. And I'm sure when it's my turn and I'm standing in the light and I have to face who I really am, oh boy, that's going to be tough for me, because I'm going to have to look to see what kind of a person I was, and I'm going to have to look to see what value I put on this life, and I'm going to have to look to see how well I nourished my soul or how badly I treated my soul. So, again, back to judging, and Dean is right, back to judging. Be careful about judging other people. Yes, next question.
Okay, we've got another live question from Val.
Val. Hello, Val. Are you a man or a woman? I wonder.
Val is a lady.
Val is a lady. Hello, Val. Nice to have you join us.
And she asks, how can we help our children or grandchildren clear karma?
How can we help our grandchildren and children clear karma? We can teach them, first of all, and I love this question. I did talk about it a little bit at the beginning. I love this question because I think it's very important for us to teach our children to think in the right way and to, be kind and to be gentle and so on. However, I'm a great believer in understanding. We can talk to our children until we're blue in the face. Our children will not learn by what we tell them, and our grandchildren certainly will not learn by what we tell them. They will learn by what they see and by what they hear us do. They will learn by our example and only by our example. And if we are living a good example and we teach them to live a good example, that, then any negativity that comes along to them, they'll be able to deal with it in a positive way and in a good way. And, I'm not afraid at all that my father's misdeeds are going to be laid at the feet of my daughter. And I'm not afraid that my misdeeds are going to be laid at the feet of my grandson. God forbid that should happen. So what I'm saying here is that, I don't believe that karmic law works in that way. I don't honestly think that God would judge my grandson, my gorgeous 3-year-old grandson, from my misdeeds. And why should he have to pay? I'm the one who did the misdeeds. I'm the one who needs to rectify those misdeeds. And sometimes you can't change a thing that you do or say, but you can live a better life, be less judgmental. As Dean will know, because he's one of my shining examples, it is not easy to change the way you live and the way you think, but you can do it if it's important to you. So, Val, I'm going to suggest be your bright and shining example for your children and for your grandchildren. You be their example. Let them learn from who you are, what you do and what you say, and how you behave towards others. And you won't have to worry about any karmic punishments for them at all. I hope that helps you. Next question, please, Carolyn.
This kind of piggybacks on what you were just discussing.
Well, good.
Richard from Sydney, Australia asks, can we change our karma?
Okay, Richard from Sydney, Australia. Well, there you have it. I think so. I think that once we begin to realize, how important it is that we behave in a way that is right and good and kind. Gregel is always saying, your world needs gentleness. And I would say our world needs more and more gentleness. The harsher our world becomes, the more our world needs gentleness. And I think it's very important for us to always show that kindness and that gentleness, even under the harshest and the hardest circumstances. I think it's important to always have your arms out ready. You reach out to people. I think it's always important to have our hearts and minds open and ready to welcome people in. And I think that our children can learn from that, our grandchildren can learn from that. But I also think that as we progress along this life, we have a great opportunity to change who we are, to to become more and to become better and to become more light and more of the light. So I guess if that's changing your karma, yes, I think we can affect our karma in that way. I'm going to tell you a little story at this point, because that question reminds me actually of a man who came to see me many years ago, and I was in Hong Kong, and this young man came to see me. He was very, very tall. In fact, he was so tall he had to duck through the doorway to get into the doorway. So I'm going to say he was at least 6'4", or maybe even taller, right? So he was very tall. And he came in and he sat down. The first thing he said to me was, well, I've got my 6 angels around me, and, I don't know if you can see them, but they're always around me, and I'm listening to this. And then he said to me at some point, he said, in a past life, I was a Roman centurion. And we were in a battle one day, and I was trampled on the field by 1,000 other soldiers. And ever since then, in every life that I've lived since then, I've always suffered with my back. And, there's nothing I can do about it. It is my karma, and it's karmic law that because I was a soldier and because I was fighting, I'm now destined to suffer with a bad back for every life that I ever live from now on. Now, those of you who have been watching these videos, and those of you who know me, and certainly my friends and family will know, I'm a very grounded person, and I'm a very down-to-earth person. So naturally, I'm going towards another reason why this man has a bad back. And I have to tell you, before I tell this story, never came back to see me, because sometimes people come to see someone like me and they don't really want you to tell them anything other than what it is they want to hear. Unfortunately, I said to this young man, well, I said, you may or may not have had a previous life where you were a Roman soldier, and you may not have fought on the battlefield. But one thing I can tell you, you can change something about your life. There is absolutely no need for you to suffer with a bad back. The reason you suffer with a bad back is because you've got extremely bad posture. Now, being tall, he got into the habit of bending and stooping. And he probably had been doing this since he was a kid, because he was probably a tall kid and embarrassed with his height and so on and so forth. So he had really, really bad posture, and he never exercised, and he never did anything about, it's so easy for us to say, the reason I'm a mean person is because someone was mean to me in a past life. It's so easy to blame past life, past experiences. It's so easy to blame karma for something that's going on in your life today that you can simply and easily, totally change. And so I said to him, if you were to, go to see a therapist, sort out your back, get some good exercises, change your posture, do all of those things, I guarantee you could fix your back and you'd have no problem whatsoever. As I say, he never came back, because I wasn't telling him what he wanted to hear, which was probably something like, I agree with all that you say, but I didn't. And I think at that point we should go on to our next question.
Marie from Texas. She asks, is karma really our angels helping us get back at someone?
Oh dear. Maria. I think our angels have got better things to do, actually, and I don't think angels are of God, and they are of the light, and they do only God's will. I can't imagine that an angel would want to get back at someone for you, or perceive that someone did something so awful to you that they want to hurt that person. So I think the answer to that question is a resounding no. I don't think that's quite the way. I don't think that's quite the case. But I'm going to tell you another funny little story now. This happened to me many years ago. I'm not going to go into the details because it's not necessary, but there was a lady who did some very bad things to me. she got into cahoots with my husband, who had left at the time, wasn't paying child support, wasn't paying actually for anything at all, and he disappeared. But she was a person who lived in the same village as us, and you know, she did very naughty things. She'd come and drive by the house and she'd spy on me, and she'd call him and tell him who was at my house, and she'd give him car numbers, and she did some horrible things. Who would do such a thing as that? You know, if somebody asked me to do it, I'd say, do your own dirty work. You know, don't ask me. I don't want to be involved in such a scheme. But anyway, this woman seemed to revel in it. And it was a while before I found out what she was doing. And when I found out, I was very disappointed, but I didn't take any action, and I didn't think any bad things about her, because I thought sooner or later she's going to realize, you know, and perhaps regret what she's doing. Who knows? Probably a year or two later, something really terrible happened to her. Not to her physically, but something very bad happened to someone she loved very dearly. It flitted across my mind, just as it's flitting across your mind, darling, and I've forgotten your name. Who is it now who's asked this question? Maria?
Yes.
It flitted across my mind that maybe this was some kind of a payback or something that happened to her, because she was an awful person and had been doing awful things. I have to tell you, though, it scared me senseless to think that maybe through me I could possibly have been the cause of having something bad happen to someone in her family. And I didn't like that at all. And that's happened to me on a couple of occasions. Another person did a very bad thing to me and later on became very ill. And again, it flitted across my mind, you know, is that because they did awful things to me and now they're getting their return? I don't like that at all. If I'm in any way responsible, I don't want to be. I try very hard to keep my thoughts positive, even towards people who do bad things to me, because I do not want to be in any small, tiny regard responsible for anything negative or bad that happens to somebody else. Remember what we said about, you know, thoughts are living things, energy is living things. Thoughts go out and they touch people and they can harm people. I do not personally want to be responsible for harming anyone. And so I'm very careful to, you know, make sure that I always pay attention, and I try very hard not to think negativity, not even in the worst of circumstances. Next question.
Ashley, it's time for the personal question.
Oh, no, not the personal question.
Is there anything that you've done that you wish you could fix, or that you wish you hadn't?
Well, you know, I was thinking when we were on the subject of karma and karmic law, and you know, and I was thinking about myself, and of course there are, I wouldn't say a trillion things that I've done that I might regret, but there are many things, and there are many times I wish I'd behaved differently. There are many times that I wish I'd behaved in a kinder way, in a nicer way, in a more positive way. Of course, I'm human, but that does not excuse me. Bad behavior, you can find a million reasons for bad behavior. Well, I'm stressed, which is why I snapped at you. Well, you know, I'm having a bad time and that's why I was mean to you. Or you can find, you know, 1,000, and I always say to my students, 1,000 reasons do not make for one good excuse. And you know what we have to do is, if the way we handle stress is to snap at somebody else or to treat somebody else meanly, we have to find a different way of expressing ourselves. We have to find a different way of dealing with our own stress and our own struggles. And we certainly should not be snapping and snarling and being mean to other people. And when you say mean things to somebody, if you snap out at someone, it's called abuse. It's called verbal abuse. And I'm just as guilty of that as anybody else. There have been times, you know, when my daughter was growing up and I was stressed and under pressure, that I would, you know, shout at her, or lash out at her because she was perhaps the only person in the room. Was that right behavior? Absolutely not. Am I sorry for that? Absolutely. Would I change it if I could? Absolutely. I'm human. I'm not giving myself a hard time about it. I'm not beating myself over the head with a big stick about it, but certainly trying to improve and to do less and less of that as we go along. However, there is one thing that I wish I could change. There was one particular instance that I wish I could change. And this wasn't something that I did because I was stressed, and it wasn't something I did because I was in a temper, and it certainly wasn't something I did because I was harboring bitter thoughts about anybody. It was something I did because I was thoughtless, just simply thoughtless. But nevertheless, it's perhaps, of all of the things I could think of, this is the one that always comes to the forefront of my mind when I think if there was perhaps something that I could change. And this is something that concerns my father. Many years ago, I'd left home. I was married, but I became very, very ill. And I was in hospital. I was in hospital for quite a while. I was in a coma for quite a bit of the time, and then I slowly and surely got better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and then I left the hospital. And a few months later, I had to go back in and have a second surgery. These surgeries were major surgeries at the time. This is not about the surgeries. This is not about all of that, but to sort of lead up to this. Finally, you know, I looked very thin, very skinny, and I weighed only less than 100 pounds. So lost a lot of weight. And of course, surely I could have died. So that's that story. Now, okay. The other story is, when we were younger, my father's punishment was to line us all up in front of him and my mother, and be very stern sergeant major who put, who left a footprint in the garden. Well, who knew who left the footprint in the garden? But the punishment was go upstairs, talk about it amongst yourself, and the one who's did it, come and own up. The punishment was go upstairs, take your pants off, lean over the bed and wait for me to come up. And my father sometimes would make us wait for 2 minutes, and sometimes he would make us wait for an hour. And however long he made us wait, we were laid on the face down on the bed with our bare bottom in the air. And then at some point he'd come up and he'd give us a really good hiding, and it hurt. But that was our punishment. So now here I am all of these years later, and I've had these surgeries, and at some point, and it was unusual that as a family we all got together, but at some point my sisters and I were at my parents' house with my father, and we were all sitting around the fire chatting and talking, and we were at some point talking about the fact that I'd been so ill, and as it had turned out, the fact that I'd been so ill since I was born, and now only just discovered, this issue, this problem that I had. And at some point we were all sitting around talking about it, and I was never angry with my father when I was older about the punishments, and I was never angry with my mother, and I didn't hold any bitterness towards either of them. But for whatever reason I did this. This is the one thing perhaps in my life I wish I could change, and I know that I never can. And for some reason I looked at my father and I said, you know, we were all talking about how easily and how much I did almost die. And I looked at him in the eye and I said, yes, and all those times you gave me those good hidings. I was so shocked, could have bitten my tongue off. My father said not one word, but the look on his face, the sadness, the pain, the guilt. It was as if I'd taken a sharp knife and stabbed him in the heart, and I couldn't have hurt him more had I done that. That is my regret. That is my one wish, if I could change something. I'm sure my father forgives me for it. I'm sure he understands. Not that I understand myself necessarily, but I'm sure he understands. But even so, if there is that one thing, and I'm sharing this with you because, you know, I want you to understand, all of you, you are human. We do horrible things sometimes. Just because I sit here talking about love and light and how we need to be kind and gentle does not mean that I am always those things. I'm human like the rest of you, and I do things and I say things that I regret. Not often, thank goodness, but I have done those things and I have regretted them, and some of those things I wish I could change, and no, I never can. So it's really important for you to understand and to be careful about, you know, when you say something to someone, even if you want to challenge someone or you want to say something to someone who's been mean to you, try if you can to do it in a gentle way, in a nice way. Be careful. Once those words are out of your mouth, you cannot take them back. And they have a life of their own. And they can destroy or they can build you up. You know, whether or not karmic law is responsible for the things that happen to us that are bad, we as human beings, we have a choice to live our lives in a positive way and in a good way, and that's what we should do, and that's how we should take those things. So, how are we doing here? Do we have any other live questions? Are we good? Are we done?
We're all done for today.
We're all done for today. So,
next week,
thank you. Next week, our discussion is going to be about children. It's going to be about the soul. When does the soul first enter the body, for instance? It's going to be about what happens to children who pass into the spirit world. Our youngsters, do they grow? Do they stay the same? We've had so many questions about this topic, so we decided that we're going to talk about it. What happens to miscarriages? You know, do they survive? Those children who we miscarry, do they survive? What happens to abortions? What happens to miscarriages? What happens to our children? And so we're inviting as many questions as you can think of for that. And please, you know, just feel free to answer whatever you like. We'll try and do our best to answer you. And also, if you have any suggestions about our topics for these little sessions, please send those ideas into us. We're always willing to you know, want to hear about your ideas, and we're always willing to try to accommodate you when we can. Okay, if you would like to know more about us, and to know more about me, and to know more about what we do, when I say us, I mean Grey Eagle and I, and of course Carolyn, who sits in the background there and is our go-to girl for all sorts of things, and she does a great job. If you need to know more, email us at rosemary@rosemaryaltea.com, or FaceTime. We're on FaceTime. We are on Twitter. Oh, sorry. I've just been FaceTiming with my daughter. Sorry. We are on Facebook. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Carolyn. So what would I do without her? We're on Facebook and Twitter. And if you'd like to join us there, we're also on Meetup. And as for YouTube, if you didn't manage to watch us live, you can you know, see us on YouTube. Just go to my YouTube channel. Do we have anything for the YouTube channel? Do we have a suggestion? What do people click on to watch YouTube?
Go to your channel.
There. Go to go to my channel, Rosemary Altea channel, click on, you'll see a whole list of all the things. Please subscribe. Is that what you were going to say, Carolyn?
Yeah, if they subscribe, you'll receive a notice every time you have a live event.
There you are. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, we keep you updated on any live event, whether it's in your area or another area. We will let you know when our live events are, and we'll let you know all sorts of things. Plus, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, we are organizing this little competition. It looks like it's sort of probably going to be just before Christmas, or for the, for Christmas. And we will have a few little prizes for those of you who win this competition. We think we have the questions. If you've got any challenges for us, let us know. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us once again. Have a very blessed day, and please be gentle. Our world needs gentleness. God bless you.